Good evening. Welcome to the Keep an Open Mind podcast, available on the Bigfoot Ed channel on YouTube. I'm Bigfoot Ed, your host. Tonight's discussion is going to be about the WNC Helene Survivor Encounter, which happened September 27th, 2024 in Western North Carolina. I interviewed John for several hours after he was on a very well-known podcast. But they didn't cover all of the questions that typically you would ask. So I attempted to do that. The very first question I wanted to ask him was, how close were you? What was the closest that they got to you? He and I were in a parking lot at the time, and he demonstrated by pointing to a vehicle that was not that far away, 2 car lengths away. He said they were as close as that right there. And the other thing I wanted to know was, what time did this happen? When he began his story, he began it at 4:45 when the fire department came to his house and announced that it was time to evacuate, that the water was rising in all the creeks and rivers. And he heard later that there was a potential for a earthen dam that held the reservoir for that city was threatening to be overcome. He said it was 4:45 when he got that message. He had a family member who was evacuated, but he and his wife were unable or unwilling to leave at that time. He then said that the water kind of cut off the use of their own personal vehicles because they were both rather low-lying vehicles. So he eventually got on a 4x4 that he had and drove to an area that he thought would be above the dam. He said it was around 6:30 before they were able to even leave. And it took him about an hour to get up there. Well, the almanac says that the sunrise was at 7:24 that morning. So regardless of how rainy it was, the sun was still in the sky, which I think would allow for fairly good visibility at 30 feet, even in a torrential downpour, which Tropical Storm Helene at that time was. It's estimated that it dumped 40 trillion gallons of water along its path through Georgia and the Carolinas. It certainly seemed like trillions of gallons, whatever that is. It's almost impossible to conceive about how much that is. But he says these creatures were 30 feet away. And I said to him, John, after the creatures noticed that you were there, what happened? He said, well, he and his wife were standing there, partially concealed by the fallen tree. These things, they made eye contact. He made eye contact with the larger of the two, which he said that it was at least 6'3", which is his own height. And I said, how did you figure that out? Because they were standing on the same road surface at the time, and the creature was his own height and was fairly substantially built. He said it appeared to be over 200 pounds. Not the huge 400, 500, 600, 800 pound Sasquatches that have been described throughout the country, but still, it's a pretty large individual. How long did this go on? He said. The whole encounter from when his wife got his attention as he saw these things proceeding up the road towards them, making 2 furtive attempts to climb the embankment. He said it was well over a minute. I said, "Did you breathe?" He said, "Yeah, I breathed." I sweated too. I said, "What do you mean?" He said, "When the thing looked at me, it was very scared and surprised, but I thought, they may attack us." That was his first thought. We could be attacked right here, because he didn't know what he was seeing. He described it as a female because of her mammary glands, which were exposed. The rest of her body was covered in a black hair. And so was the individual that was with her, which appeared to be a small in stature, juvenile male, who the hair was the same. And here's the thing I really wanted to know. I said, "John, what color was the skin?" Now, John is not a Bigfoot researcher or explorer or any of that. He doesn't really know about the skin tone grades that are normally talked about in sightings. He said it was brown. It was dark brown. I said, "Okay. What about the face? What was the proportions of the face?" He said, "It looked human, except for the hairline, which went straight across the forehead, down on the brow, and the hair went back." I said, "What about the nose?" He didn't notice anything peculiar about it. And I said, "Tell me something. Do you recall the distance between the nose and the top lip? Did you notice that?" He said, "Why?" I said, "Well, if you look at people, rarely is the distance between any human being more than an inch between the nose and the lip. This gap right here is small on all Homo sapiens, just about. But in some apes and reported Sasquatch visuals, that gap is quite remarkable because the mouth is lower down the jaw. It's a different face than a human face. It's human-like." And he said, "Well, now that you ask me about that, I must say that that gap was large enough to notice. I just didn't know that that was something that was peculiar." "Did you notice anything about the teeth or anything?" He didn't really notice any grinning or grimaces or, the teeth alignment. And I said, "John, you say that they turned after they saw you, they turned and they ran." He said, "Yeah." "How did they run?" John has had occasion to see a lot of people run in his hobbies and other things like that. He may even have played ball when he was young. He's a fairly statuesque man. He said, "They ran kind of weird." I said, "Did they run on all fours? Because we're trying to eliminate that this is a bear or a weird dog or something, right?" He said, No, they ran together, side by side. But the female, she kind of kept her arms at her side. Wasn't like a normal, how we are. When we run, humans swing their arms to, keep that motion going. He said, "They didn't run like that. They kept the arms at her side, and it was damn weird. But they were quick. And they took off up the road." And that's when he realized, he thought, they may be going to tell another one of these things that we're here. So we got to get out of here. And then I asked him the other question. I said, well, where did y'all go? What did you do? He said, my wife looked at me and I looked at her, and she said, did you see that? I mean, we were stunned. We were just in shock almost. Even though it had been a minute, she's just like, did you see that? And he said, yeah, what was that? He said, I don't know, but let's get out of here. We're not going any further. They got back on the quad and went down the road to another spot that was above the dam. They were already above the dam, but they were trying to loop around and go to a higher spot that would give them a full view of the dam. And he said by this time, most of the rain had stopped and there was pretty good light, which is true. If you guys remember that morning, that once the rain stopped, everybody just came out and observed if they, hadn't already been evacuated or lived somewhere where they could view what was going on. It was quite devastating, but there was light, and so that time it would have been, going for 8 o'clock. And John's told me that he, since been going online, listening to podcasts, trying to find someone else who's seen something, looking at it. But here's the other part. This is the part that's great. He said when they ran off, he could see plain as day that these creatures were fully covered in hair from head to toe on the back, but there was a thick stripe of hair down that started at the head, he said, and ran all the way down the back. That hair was thicker. I was like, did they have a tail? He said, no. But you have to understand now, these creatures were soaking wet. And so the rest of the hair was matted on the skin, but this thick stripe of black hair stood out to him. And he said, when I saw that, I knew that this was no kind of person I'd ever seen. And that's when he really knew that he had to find some answers. What the heck have I just seen? I wasn't able to give him any answers. I don't know. I asked him, did it have, some of the Sasquatch sightings, a lot of them, talk about the musculature of Sasquatch and how the neck, the trapezius is huge, and that the head, the muscles going into the head, make it have the appearance that the head there's no neck. I said, did they have that? He said, no. I said, when they turned to look at you, did they turn the head or turn their upper torso? He said, no, it seemed like it was just a head turn. Wow. Fascinating. Did they make any noises? Did they make any sounds? Did they scream? Anything like that? No. He said, of course, it was raining still. He didn't hear that. And he said he did not hear the communication between the young one and the older one. He said it didn't, maybe it was a mother and child, but he didn't know. They seemed to be, filial in a sense with each other. The bigger one was looking out for the younger one. That the younger one did communicate in some way, whether he squeezed her hand or something, because it was the small one saw he and his wife first. And how it went, in case you didn't hear the broadcast, they were running up the trail towards them. And they tried to go up an embankment. He said that the first attempt was probably 50 feet away. She went partially up and slid back down. And the young one didn't follow her. The bank was all wet with rain and falling apart and loose foliage and everything, and just couldn't make it up there. It ran up the road to another location, which brought them within 30 feet of John and his wife. Now, 30 feet is close. It's 2 cars. That's 2 car lengths. That's pretty damn close. He said they went up the bank. She went up the bank. He could see that she had breasts. It was a female. She went up the bank and then slid back down. And when she came back down, that's when the young one got her attention And she looked, and they looked at them, and they were just like surprised, scared, whatever. And then they turned and ran. I said, John, did you breathe? He said, no, but I was sweating. And I just have to tell you, I truly believed him. I've interviewed quite a few people for different reasons. There's no reason for this man to lie. He does not want to be known. He doesn't want to speak at conventions. Doesn't want to go on any more podcasts. The only reason he agreed to interview me is because I just told him that I'm a scientist and I'm trying to use scientific method to determine answers that have to do with these peculiar encounters. And that's the truth. We've since gone on a few expeditions in that area. Not John and I, but me and a couple of my crew. And I plan on going on one in the near future with John to an area above where the sighting was, over in the western North Carolina area. Balsam Mountain. There's a lot of trails around there. There's a lot of open country. It's pretty wilderness. You get a half a mile off the road and there ain't nothing there but you and whoever you're with. And there's plenty to eat, plenty to drink, and places to find shelter. I have it in good authority that area is full of caves. So that's my explanation of my interview with John. And if you have questions, please put them in the comments. This is not a live broadcast, but I'm hoping to do one in the near future. But I just wanted to put this out tonight to answer some of the questions that are out there and test my new setup. Hope you don't think the red lighting is weird. I just thought I'd check it out. But I want you to remember, keep an open mind, right? Because you never know what it is going bump in the night. Bigfoot Ed. Check it out.